ability to be clever and so forth. Well, you don't find that on her list of virtues as well. So I do want you to think about, are there virtues that she sort of left out that we should be considering as important? I don't know. I'm not going to try to answer that question for you. Now that we got that framework, what I did here was I just put in some more detail about how to defend rights. And this is, I suppose, as much me as it is Rand, though Rand is sort of the inspiration. But I wanted to give a little more detail because so much depends in the classical liberal tradition on rights. I called it an appendix because I wasn't sure if I had time to go through this, and it's a little more detailed than some other things I've talked about, but we can run through it quickly. The conditions that a right must have in order to be a basic negative human right that I've been talking about, here are some of those conditions. As I said, it must be universal, that is, applies to us as persons. Not some persons have basic rights and some don't. So universality is a condition of something being a basic right. Whatever it is, the basic right is, it's got to be concretely present in any and every form of human flourishing. That's what the HS stands for. So whatever it means to flourish as a human being, there's got to be something that the right is referring to, was protecting, that is present in every act of human flourishing. Okay? Now, what I'm basically doing is I'm developing conditions which are going to define that if something doesn't meet these conditions, it can't be a basic right. Keep going here. It must appeal, the right must appeal or protect something that is necessary, that every individual has a stake in, as an individual, has an interest in, if you will, and whatever that is, it's got to be present in each and every act of human flourishing as well. It must recognize the ethical individualism. This is the point earlier I made that, in fact, the good in the end has to be the good for you, okay, and the good for me. They're not general, generic goods, but individualized goods. And the requirement, whatever it is, means that it has to be achievable. Okay, so if we seek to protect the possibility of self-directedness in a social context, remember that's what I suggested a right does. It protects the possibility for you to act self-directedly. That is to say, if we merely seek to establish the structural political conditions that protect the possibility of self-directedness in a social context, then we don't prejudice or we favor some forms of human flourishing over others. Okay? So, I really think it's extremely important to spend a lot of time reading classical philosophers. Okay, this is what makes me flourish. Right? Now, there'd be something wrong, however, with a system which made you do the same thing. Okay? That is, it may just be that the form of flourishing for me is not the same as the form of flourishing for you. I know that's hard for me to believe, that everybody shouldn't be like me. But that's true, and you have to realize that, okay? So what you're looking for is a framework which doesn't sort of say systematically or institutionally, here's the right way to live, okay? Here's the wrong way to live, okay? What you're trying to do is protect the various possibilities of living a good human life without prejudicing it in one form of life or another. So, and we've seen societies historically that still exist, which sort of identify what the good human life might be. It might be living the commercial life, okay, being a successful entrepreneur. I mean, you could imagine a society which then penalized people who wanted to live as monks or who wanted to live a reclusive intellectual life or something like that. Those people could be penalized. But we don't want that any more than we want the opposite, which is a society which says, well, the best sort of life is the life of the monk or the reclusive intellectual or something like that, and we're going to penalize those people who don't live like that. What I'm trying to suggest is basic rights are trying to protect all forms of human flourishing. Okay, so we're protecting something that's not only common to, but indeed required by all forms of human flourishing. If it's a right, it's got to be common, it's got to be something we each have a stake in, Okay, what is that thing is what we're trying to get at here. Has to be present in every form of human flourishing. Okay? We protect an aspect of human flourishing which every individual has a necessary stake, regardless of one's form of human flourishing. It is good to be self-directed. That's the key. Okay? If you want another language, it's allowing you to make choices. If you go back and look at the conditions I've been giving, right, the only thing that is universal, necessary, absolutely present in every act of human flourishing, you have a stake in it in every act you take. What is that? That is choice. Okay? It doesn't bias it, doesn't bias the system in favor of my way of choosing versus your way. All it says is, we're going to protect choice. Okay? That's the only thing you can think of. You can talk about generic goods, you can talk about health, you can talk about friendship, you can talk about all these things, but in fact, their forms as they exist in individual cases are going to be very different from one individual to another. So in the end, the only thing that we can say universally that applies to all of us, okay, without prejudicing the system in favor of some of us over others, the only thing that applies to all of us, and the only thing that each of us, okay, has a stake in, is choice. Okay? Because any act of flourishing that we have has to come from some element of choice of our own. Okay? I cannot flourish if the choices being made are your choices, not my choices. That's not my flourishing, that's your flourishing. Okay? And this is why choice or self-directedness or whatever term you want to use is so central to talking about rights, which is why that is what has to be protected most of all. If we protect that, we're not guaranteed a flourishing life. That's a whole other problem, as I said earlier. But we are guaranteed that if you take the right actions, or you will be free to take the right actions, if you can figure out what they are for you, you're not going to be impeded in any way in taking those actions. Okay, so in the end, what we recognize with a right, a negative human right like this, is that every individual ought to pursue and achieve his or her own form of human flourishing without pretending we can make them do so. Okay, so we're saying that rights are a moral concept, even though they're not telling you how to behave. They're saying they point to one very critical fact about all moral concepts, which is they have to result from choice in order to qualify as moral. This is my last slide. So, is protecting individual rights the end? No, it's the beginning, which is sort of a pun. If you look on page 1061 of your Atlas Shrugged, Dagny says, this is the end, and John Galt says, no, it's the beginning, so I thought I'd be clever and do that in my last slide. But if you haven't gotten to that page yet, it's not so clever. But the point conceptually is that rights provide a beginning from which people can then start to live their lives the way they should and ought to live their life. So that's my talk. Thank you.